So welcome to Korea.
Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe the this summer we visit already. We meet already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the time we have an interview from our distiller. So it's
In a sample room.
yeah, and then this is my first time to interview you and me.
Correct.
Even we meet many years
Correct.
before.
First proper interview.
Yeah. So
Discussion.
I introduced many times the Blonde Distillery, but today I will ask some distilling and blending and something like that.
Sure.
Some more, but slightly different. It's not for the Blonde Distillery.
Okay. General
Yeah,
questions.
general things,
General.
but people think about you're thinking about the whiskey and then distilling and blending. So first of all, how do you think about the sherry cask supplier? For example, people say the signatory is in the old aged things, the first few sherry butts, the taste almost the same.
Okay.
Yeah, so do you think about the taste different in the sherry supplier each, or just up to the aging?
Well, we have to think about a few things. No, firstly is the oak type. So although it's sherry, if it's American oak and European oak or Spanish oak, they will be very different. Okay. And then below that, think of it as a hierarchy. Below that, you've then got how is that wood heat treated? So how is that American oak charred and toasted differently to the Spanish oak charred and toasted? Those toasting and charring profiles will bring out the flavors differently. And then below that is the type of sherry. So Oloroso or PX or red wine if it's a wine cask. The alcohol within those sherries and the sugars within those sherries will break the wood down further and create different flavors. So when we talk to our suppliers, we speak in oak type, American oak, European oak, and we'll speak in toasting times and temperatures of what we're asking for. And then we'll season the casks accordingly with Oloroso or PX. So that's how we get different flavors, not really supplier to supplier, but cask type to cask type and how we brief those cask types.
So it means even the different supplier, for example, the same chart, Oloroso, European, taste is almost the same.
Yeah, if they're making the same cask, they will be similar. Yeah,
Okay.
Now you can work out who's maybe toasting a little bit longer, or a
Okay.
little bit less.
That's for the
Yeah.
personal design.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. then
They'll
what?
be the same target. Same target.
So and then one more thing is normally the standard sherry cask is medium toasted, and then the seasoned 1 or 3 years. But sometimes we using the heavy charred sherry cask. Is good for the longer maturation, or?
But the char is doing something different to the toast. The toast is providing flavour, so it's adding flavours to the whiskey. So medium toast, that might be the medium toast for me is probably 45 minutes at about 240, 250 degrees C. When we char, that means it's combusted, and that's a carbon layer. And what that does is that subtracts from the whiskey, that filters. So depending on what spirit you put in, depends on do you need a char, do you not need a char, do you want a heavy toast, do you want a not heavy toast. So you combine how you make your cask with the type of spirit you put in. If you put a big heavy spirit in there, you might need some heavier toasting or some additional charring to make that work. If it's a light fruity spirit, you might not need as much. So it depends on what you're trying to put into it as well.
Yeah, okay.
And then you work out how long that will take.
Yes. So the one more question is the cask finish. What is your thinking about the cask finish? So normally, I think this is a very good for the combination about the profile. But the people says some refill cask to turn out to the sherry cask, and then they want to sell very expensive. They will cask finish, but I cannot agree. But I don't know. I want to know your thinking about cask finish.
So finishing has a place, okay, and I think it should be used properly. It should be used to change the whiskey for a story or to demonstrate how we make a whiskey. We don't finish a Bládnoc unless we say we finish. So things like the waterfall and wave, they're all finishing experiments, so we say that. The reason I prefer maturation, which is longer, and for me it's over 3 years, because there's three things going on in maturation. One is additive, one's subtractive, and one's oxidative or interactive. Short period of time, you can get the additive extract out, so it happens pretty quick, 2 to 3 years. Subtractive takes a little bit longer, maybe an extra couple of years, and you need a char layer. But if you've got a light spirit, you might not need as much subtractive. The interactive, the oxidative, needs a bit more time. Once you've got the extract in there from the cask, it has to break down, it has to interact with oxygen, it has to interact with the distillate, and that takes a mature piece of time, so 3 to 5 to 10 years. For me, when we do finishing, it can come across as artificial, so you get all the extract, but you don't get any interactive. So for me, finishing, I think my preference is to use it for very specific reasons, not to cut costs and cut corners. You should use it for very specific reasons.
Yeah, and
then I think mature gives you interactive maturation, and that really gives you the non-artificial notes that come through finishing sometimes.
For example, the finish longer, like 6 years or 10 years. It's the same.
If you go 6 years, you're into maturation. So
It's not a finish.
It's not finish anymore, it's a maturation. So I think anything over 2 to 3 years should be called maturation. Now you might double mature, so you might go from refill to sherry 6 years, and 6 years gives you 12, but I would call that a double maturation rather than a finish, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
finish for me is
just one year, 6 months.
3 to 6 months, exactly.
Okay.
Quick turnaround. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about finishing.
I always think about the double maturations or the finish is the same, and or blending. People thinking about, even in Korea, thinking about the European sherry, single cask, cask strength. Yeah, I know that it will be tasty, but not every single cask is tasty.
Exactly. They're all European sherry casks. Some might come across more with raisins. Some might come across more like coffee. Some might come across more like fruitcake, cinnamon or herbs. So they'll all have the same characteristics, but they will have different peaks as they come across the bench. They'll have different peaks, like an equalizer on a music bench.
Yeah,
it's like that. Think of it that way.
Yeah, so I always think about the blending is really the artist, about the whiskey artistic, because the maker profile, we don't know the maturation. You cannot imagine the 10 years later, 12 years, we don't know.
Until it comes across.
So arrange the taste and design the taste is the finalizing the product is a blending.
Yes.
But people think about the blending means like some put in the cheap and then bad cask in there.
Well, bad cask. I've never seen. There's only ever been 2 casks that I've known of that are unusable. You can't use them anywhere. So what is a bad cask for Vinaya might not be a bad cask for Samsara, and that might not be a bad cask for 13. So it depends on what product you're going to make. Depends on if it's the right cask or the wrong cask. So there's always a use for a cask. There's always a use for a cask. I'll find a use.
Yeah, people want to understanding the why single cask is expensive. And then I told them because this is very hard to take some money, because labels special for 1 300, 200,
the big right.
And then marketing for the 200, 300 is a different, like a big volume, like a Vinaya.
Yeah.
So that's why the expensive, and then put in the water. So the price is slightly different.
Yeah, and the single, so that's a bigger write-off, you're right. And I hear about that all the time from procurement in my. But they're also collectible. The one cask, if it's a bourbon, 300 bottles. That's it. Sherry cask maybe, or a sherry, but 400 or 500 bottles and done. So you can collect them. So they're very, very rare. But also, as I'm making 13, okay, and all the bourbons, occasionally I'll nose and I'll nose and nose, and all of a sudden a cask will jump out. One of the spikes that I told you about, it might be very vanilla, it might be very honeyed. It's done something unique. So that cask will then be a special cask that's then pulled out to become a single cask at some point. We don't go in and just choose casks randomly. The single casks select themselves. They shine, they show themselves. So they've done something special. They're not just a random bourbon or a random sherry. They've picked themselves as we go through the process. So they are special casks. They're special.
Yeah, and then let's talking about some new make spirit.
Okay.
We can find some Bládnoc, the new make spirit, but name is slightly different, like Coquan or Coquan, yeah. And what is the different, the new make spirit in the process?
Sure.
The different recipe or what's the difference?
Yes, the answer. Different recipe from a process point of view. So, same fermentation, same mash bill, same yeast content, so on and so forth. What we do for Bládnoc is that we will cut our heads at around about 15 minutes, so around about 71%. For Cacaoan, we would cut at 20 minutes, so around about 70%. So the kind of fruity esters that come off first, they are held more for Bládnoc than Cacaoan. So Cacaoan comes across slightly more cereal than Bládnoc does, because we cut slightly later in the run for the heads.
Yeah.
So that's the differentiator.
But very big difference, but very small difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We protect Bládnoc, and that's the purpose, and we make sure that Bládnoc's got that floral fruity aspect, and we differentiate it to make sure Cacaoan's very slightly more comes across more cereal. But in terms of we don't add a different yeast or a different mull or change fermentation. Keep the process very, very similar, and we change the cut points.
Maybe probably the same process in the Macallan. Sometimes the independent bottler released Speyside M or
Speyside M, yeah. But those are from quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they were cutting at.
I mean,
they might well have been protecting it. Yeah.
They have some the different recipe, right?
A different process.
What different is we don't know, but
correct.
Yeah,
correct.
But they maybe make different.
Yeah. Different, yeah. They would also be protecting the brand, so naming rights don't come with independents a lot of the time. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't think everybody changes. I think sometimes it just goes straight through, and there's an independent sold as name spirit. But we want to protect Bládnoc, so we do it from a intellectual property, but also from a stylistic perspective as well.
Yeah, so and then we can talking about the age statement and price in the market. The people they're very confusing sometimes. For example, think about the Macallan or the M decanter. It's a very expensive but non-age statement.
Correct.
And sometimes the Tamna Berlin sherry cask is very cheap. Is also non-aging statement. Some 18 years old very cheap, or 12 years very expensive.
Yeah.
So, what are you thinking about the age statement?
Age and colour are not correlated with you will like it or not. Okay, so an 18 might be great for you, and it might be not so great for me because we're different. So colour and age aren't the defining features of I will like it or I will not. The price is really dictated by demand, an age criteria or a sherry cask criteria. For me, it's more trying to translate what it tastes like, so people can buy based on am I going to enjoy this or not. If there's a 30-year-old Lagavulin and it's 30-year-old Lagavulin £1,000, okay.
Oh yeah.
Probably more, but for the sake of this, £1,000. If you don't like peat and smoke, it could be 50 years old. You're just not going to like it.
Yeah.
So for me, it's trying to, and it's the Scotch industry's problem to do. We need to work a way of communicating better what it tastes like, and then how rare it is and how we did it. But primarily, are people going to enjoy it? And that for me should be why they buy it. That's we ask about what my inspiration is to make sure people have a great whiskey.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. It's a very big problem.
Big
People
problem, big challenge.
Confusing.
Yeah.
The price, the kind of only can do is Scotland, because other whiskeys like Japanese can do,
Japanese do love it, bourbons
or Taiwanese or Korean.
Yeah.
So we don't have any old stocks.
Yeah.
So only Scotch can do 30 years or 50 years or so. That makes a difference in the other whiskey.
Makes a difference,
Yeah.
and then there's a place for that, because when we say 30, we really mean rare. And when you get into 30 years old, you're starting to taste a part of history. It's a different mindset. But when we talk about what's the flavours like and what is age used for, age is really used for price. 12 equals this price, 18 is that price, 15 is this price. That doesn't really mean it's worth spending that amount if you don't like it. So we need to add more information.
Yeah. So and then the same story. Could you explain for why you changed the 11 to 30 and 14 to 16?
When I first joined, I wanted to be able to make sustainable whiskies, and not from an environmental point of view, but we need to do that more from a consumer point of view. So it was always 11, always 14, always 19. And we saw points in the maturing stocks that allowed us to do that. So that's why we chose them. And I always wanted them to be offset. So from the classic 12, 15, 18, I wanted it to be offset, like Craig Elliott did. But then there was a thought, we had the flexibility to, instead of offsetting it down, we wanted to offset above. So that was the reason we changed it from 11 to 13 and from 14 to 16. So we're sat slightly off, but to the upside of the rest of the kind of standard ways of aging whiskey.
Yeah, okay.
Very similar whiskies though, very similar whiskies.
Okay, it's nice.
If you like 11, you'll like 13. And if you like 14, you'll like 16.
Yeah. And then